Hi, my name's Anthony Warner. I'm the Angry Chef. I want to talk about misinformation in food, which is the heart of a lot of stuff I've written about. And what I've always been really interested in is the reasons why people are susceptible to misinformation in the world of food. One really interesting thing I've looked at over the years is this idea of regression to the mean. And so for people who don't understand what that means, it's actually a pretty simple concept. You imagine something like a sports team, and their performance might be variable. Sometimes it might be really good, sometimes it might be really bad, and there's also sort of an average and mean of their performance over time. What regression to mean is basically says that when that team's doing really well, the likelihood is the next time you measure it, it'll be closer to the mean. It'll regress back towards the mean, so that their performance will have fallen a bit. And when they're doing really badly, then the next time you measure it, the likelihood is that it's going to regress back towards the mean and that their performance will have improved a little bit. And that just naturally happens. When you're doing really well, you start to do badly. When you're doing really badly, you'll probably start to do well because things are random. And so that kind of makes sense to most people. But the interesting thing is that we always sort of come up with stories to explain it. You know, there's a thing called the Sports Illustrated curse, which is when a sports person appears on the cover of Sports Illustrated, their form starts to decline. It's like a curse. We've been on Sports Illustrated, and people will make up stories and say, oh, they went to their head, or you know, they started they were earning too much money and they don't care as much anymore, or something like that. But the reality is that when you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated, the likelihood is you're doing really, really well, and when you're doing really, really well, then next time it's measured, you're likely to have regressed slightly towards the mean. So it's probably better explained by just sort of constant, expected regression. So I think that's really interesting, and the fact that we make up these stories mean that the regression to the mean is often hidden. And actually, it didn't enter into the scientific understanding until the late 19th century. A guy called Francis Galton, who had some questionable views about other stuff, but was a brilliant man, discovered this idea of regression to the mean. And so it came into scientific understanding after lots of sort of things that things like the theory of evolution and universal gravitation, and sort of it's even though it's a simple concept, it's quite hard for us to grasp and visualize sometimes because we like to make up stories. Why is that interesting in the world of food? Well, I think it's a source of a lot of dietary misinformation. So if you think about people who influence in health, often they'll talk about their health journey where they were feeling really sick and they changed their diet and their health started to improve. And they create this association between their dietary change and the improvements in their health, and that becomes part of their journey and their story, and they use that to communicate to the world about their diet. Or let's say a sports person is going through a bad run of form and he changes his diet and cuts out gluten, and then suddenly starts to improve. Who will probably, because we are storytelling creatures who are really inclined to believe these sort of stories, he will probably then go, oh, you know, the dietary change caused that improvement. But the reality is that it was regressing back towards the mean, regressing back towards the average, and that's probably the more likely explanation. But we like the story explanation, so we're really inclined to these stories, and it can cause a lot of misunderstandings about diet. It creates a lot of these anecdotal stories, which are obviously very powerful in communication, as to how changing a diet can improve this aspect of your performance, of your health, of your personality. And you know, for me, that's a source that I see that a lot in the world of dietary misinformation, and it's something that we really need to learn to be better at spotting if we want to sort of call out misinformation and pseudoscience in food.